We are taking a look at the Fate of Reiters. This is 5 Battles of the French Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598. This is from Hexasim, game design Philippe Hardy. This is part of the by Shot, Shock, and Faith. You can see it's in English there. I actually have a copy of Shot, Shock, and Faith, although you can see the box has the title in French. I don't know if there was everything in the box is in English. I don't know if there was ever a English box cover that was released. As you can see, this new edition has all English on the cover. So, yeah, I don't know if Hexasim ever did an English box of the first game in the series. I did some video on that about 4 years ago or so. This just came out here in the States. It may have been out longer in France. I just am starting turn 3 of Cognat, I guess, kind of like cognac, but with a T instead. And I just realized it's also pretty close, about a week ago, date-wise. It's a battle in January of 1568. I am just starting turn 3, and the Catholics are up 22-0, which is going to be a major victory. You can see here on the map, and this is area control, just to kind of summarize the the spaces are different terrain is delineated by these boxes and by the borders. Dashes pretty much mean there's no kind of terrain modifier between spaces. The number, in this case, you see zeros here in front of the numbers, and then you get to over here and you see a 1. That means the elevation is different. So a 0 to a 1. I don't know if it goes as high as 2 or not. These are 1 is all you see here. So that indicates elevation changes, which is interesting because if you have units with the yellow numbers in a 1 space, I can actually point here. These guys are in a 126 space. They actually can't, and these are ranged guys. Guys with the yellow are ranged. Guys with the orange triangles are melee. Well, ranged guys cannot fire from a 1 to, in this case, 126 to a 0 space if it's adjacent. So like a higher can't fire into a lower. So you'll notice this space is surrounded on all sides by zeros, but these guys who start here cannot shoot at anybody, essentially cannot attack at all. All they can do is do ranged fire. These are not melee units. They can't shoot at anybody in these surrounding spaces because it is a lower elevation that is adjacent. So one of the reasons why this appears to be such a walkover for the Catholics, because the Protestants have nowhere to go. So, and that one of their victory conditions for the Protestants is to try to get off the edge of the board, because they were essentially traveling down this road, and the Catholics were sitting there waiting for them. And yet the Catholics started with the initiatives. The Catholics basically rushed them, and these units, the Protestant units, started, I think they had some detachments here of Les Enfants Perdus, and then they had some cavalry on their wings out here. Well, it's all been destroyed. They've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They've lost 8 units, including all of their gendarmes, which are the cav that they had. Essentially, the Catholics had a larger force and a higher quality force, and thus what we see happened, which is they got kind of annihilated. I'll try and set this camera down so it's not moving so much. So it seems like, and the designer says, hey, these are not necessarily balanced. The victory conditions try to make them balanced. I don't even know if that's really the case here, because I don't know that the Protestant units have the quality to be able to effectively destroy the Catholic units. And the Catholics moved up and engaged immediately, and I tried some counter fire, reaction fire with the Protestants, and that was probably a mistake, because ordinarily on reaction fire, or ranged combat for that matter, your attacking units, or in this case your firing units, usually can't take damage. It's just they're checking to see if they can fire and hit units at a distance, and that usually means, especially if they're shooting at melee units, that they shouldn't be exposed to danger if they're firing, at ranged combat. Well, this game doesn't have any fire combat. Everything's just combat, and so even units that are ranged units, which are again the units with the yellow circle behind their numbers, those units can be damaged when they conduct a fire attack. So you can't just safely try and snipe at people with your range units in this. If they attack, they're attacking like any other combat. So what happened was I did some reaction fire, and got a lot of disorganized or step loss results for the guys that were doing the reaction fire. And as a result, when it came around to their turn, they weren't really in a good position to follow that up with powerful attacks. But again, even when it came to their turn, it's not like the reaction fire had protected them in some way. When it came around to their turn, they were just doing the same, unlikely to succeed attacks that they would have been doing, that they had just done on the reaction fire. So really, just attacking at all with them was a bad idea. Part of it being that the bulk of the force, and you can see here their leader's been killed. He's been flipped over. He was a casualty in one of those combats. And I tried to move him up so that they could move him into a zone where they could actually fire at the surrounding areas, because here, all of these arquebusiers are trapped. They can't attack anybody. Now, conversely, if I have ranged units adjacent to them, these ranged units can't shoot at them either, but the Catholics happen to have a number of melee units that can hit this space. And from here, they even don't have the extra terrain. They do have the terrain. The defenders will have a terrain bonus here. I think it's a +2 against melee units. But if I can get these guys around, if I can get the Catholics around to hit the city from this side, this is Cognat here, if they can hit the city from this side, they're crossing these dashed lines, which means they can use their charge attacks if they haven't used them by the point that they got there. And these guys hadn't, so they were able to charge in there and do some damage, even though the terrain modifier worked against them. Their charge offset it. So that's what the disadvantage that the Protestants are in is that their ranged units start in a space that can't shoot into any, they can't attack at all into any of these spaces that surround it. So it's kind of a terrible starting position for them. And the problem is the Catholics can get right up adjacent to this. And these spaces are also considered adjacent because junction points are adjacent. So this space is adjacent here. This space down here is adjacent to this space. So cross junctions are also considered adjacent, which is, I think, kind of rare for area control games like this. But not an unwelcome mechanism in my mind. It does definitely makes you think more about how the spaces are related to each other, as well as allows you to get some command. The command radius of your leaders is 3 spaces. So ordinarily, if you didn't have the junction things, you could say, okay, that's within 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, actually, it's 1, 2, 3. So these guys over here are adjacent, even though you've got units in the way. You can trace command radius around because these junction points are adjacent. So just a different way of thinking about things. You kind of have to remind yourself of it from time to time. One of the things, and there's not a lot of pages of rules in this. There's really only, minus the examples of play, there's really only 15 pages of rules, and two and a half of those pages are some of the optional advanced rules that you can add on. So it's not a complicated game by any means, but the modifiers and stuff take some getting used to. The terrain differences take some getting used to, the moving between the different types of spaces, or GZs in this place, game zones. It takes some kind of getting used to the fact that Zocs and things add to your movement. It's all fairly normal. I'm just trying to avoid the glare here. It's all fairly normal, but it's just hard to remember without constantly looking at the chart for me. It's takes a little work, takes a little play, and then you have to remember that if a unit spends more than 3 points to enter a game zone, they have to make a quality check. If they spend more than 4, they're automatically disordered, and so that's just one of those things that I've had trouble remembering as I was playing. So I probably moved some guys around at certain points and forgot to do that disorganization check. And then, remembering the various terrain modifiers for the defender, depending on what the attacker, what type of unit the attacker is, and what type of space it's entering, and what type of border it's crossing. Like, there's just kind of these layered effects of modifiers. And then when you're doing your fighting, you've got a long list of modifiers that you run down here, and then you can get individual leaders that will affect individual units. So stuff just starts to stack up in these layers that can be difficult to remember when you're playing. So it's simple. There's not a lot of complexity to what you're doing. It's just there's a lot of pieces, I guess, to each action that you're taking, whether it's movement or combat. There's just a very procedural checklist that you're kind of moving your way through. So I recall vaguely, I think I had the same or similar comments when I did my videos on by Shot, Shock, and Faith over there. This seems very much more of the same type of stuff. I didn't see anything in the rules that was significantly different. And in fact, the rule book for the Fate of Reiters says that you can just use this rule book for by Shot, Shock, and Faith. So there may be some clarifications or slight rewording of things to make the rules a little smoother or more understandable. I will have to explore some of the other battles. This one, I think, is one of the easier ones to do. There's no mounted arquebusiers in this. It's all gendarmes, I believe. No riders. There's just chevaux légers and gendarmes here, as well as pikemen and arquebusiers. There's more special rules with like the riders and the artillery, and I thought there was another. I guess the leaders too. The other battles have leaders that have different effects depending on what type of unit they're dealing with. So some of the other battles just have more chromey bits than this one. This one's very straightforward, and in my opinion, not particularly balanced. The Protestants got hosed, and I'm not sure what a good way of avoiding that is, because if the Catholics move expeditiously, they can basically get right in here. I think here I had 2 detached units, the Les Enfants Perdus. Those guys could have retreated back to here. I actually had them stay there and try and kind of maintain a presence in that space. They were killed pretty quickly by the surrounding Catholic units, and then tried to move out of Cognat into this space to push back, and just got nowhere. It was just kind of a disaster for the Protestants. So they basically all died in here. And that was on turn 2, you know. So the Catholics pretty much punched them in the face on turn 1, and then they just never recovered. And you know, it can go 7 turns. I'm not sure how it would ever last that long, but you know, there it is. I might give it another try and see what happens if I am less aggressive in doing like reaction combat with the Protestants. But again, you know, if I don't get them out of this space, they really can't counterattack at all. So the question is, do I try and move them forward, or do I try and have them retreat back into the more favorable terrain of the forest? You know, I don't know. But whatever I did was a terrible idea. So anything different than what I did would be better for the Protestants. So anyway, that's just a quick look at one of the battles, Battle of Cognat, from the Fate of Reiters from Hexasim. So I will probably look at some of the other battles and maybe post some video on those once I've played them as well.